She said, "Daddy's calling me." No one believed her until they heard the knocking. Welcome to our storytelling corner, where every tale is filled with mystery, emotion, and unforgettable twists. If you're enjoying today's story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing from our global family. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because tomorrow we have another breathtaking story that you won't want to miss. Thank you for being here. Your support means the world to us, and it keeps the magic alive, one story at a time. Grace Hill Church stood cloaked in a quiet, heavy sorrow. The white steeple rose into the overcast sky, casting a long shadow over the gathered mourners below. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and wood polish, and the soft sound of sniffles echoed off the stone walls. It was the funeral of Jackson Miller, a beloved man known for his kindness, his steady hands, and his unwavering devotion to his family. At the front of the sanctuary stood his oak coffin, sealed, polished, and surrounded by flowers. The candles on the altar flickered gently, their flames dancing in the draught that crept beneath the ancient wooden doors. Beside the casket stood Sarah, Jackson's widow, only 33, her face pale and drawn. Her black dress hung loosely on her frame, as if grief had already begun to hollow her out. In her trembling arms she held Emily, their 3-year-old daughter, whose small body shifted restlessly. The child had cried for hours until her voice became a faint hoarse whisper, but now something in her changed. Emily twisted in her mother's grasp and pointed her tiny finger toward the coffin. "Daddy," she whispered. Sarah froze. "Sweetheart, Daddy's resting now," she murmured, bending down, brushing the child's soft blonde hair from her flushed cheeks. But Emily shook her head stubbornly and pointed again. "Daddy's calling me," she said. "He's scared." A few mourners turned toward the sound, their eyes filled with a mix of pity and confusion. Sarah blinked, trying to steady her breathing. She had read once that children often misunderstood death, that they could speak nonsense while grieving. But Emily didn't look confused. She looked terrified. "Emily," Sarah began, her voice barely audible. Before she could say more, Emily's eyes locked on the casket again, and she let out a sudden, piercing scream. "Daddy's stuck. He's knocking. Help him." The church fell into stunned silence. Then a quiet murmur passed through the crowd like wind rustling dry leaves. Sarah's knees nearly gave out. She clutched her daughter tightly as Emily began to cry again, pointing at the coffin with trembling fingers. "Please, Mama, Daddy's calling for me. I hear him." A cold ripple moved through the room. No one spoke. Even the minister paused, his mouth slightly open, unsure whether to comfort or pray. Then came a sound. Thud. So soft it might have been imagined. A creak? A settling board? But then thud. Thud. Gasps broke out among the mourners. Sarah's heart slammed against her chest, her gaze fixed on the casket, and for one terrifying moment, the world around her seemed to blur. Was it possible? Did anyone else hear that? Someone whispered. Sarah looked at Emily, whose eyes were wide and tear-filled. She was no longer just a grieving child. She was a messenger. And whatever was inside that coffin wasn't resting in peace. Not yet. The thudding from the coffin hadn't stopped. It had quieted for a moment, just long enough for people to question whether they'd heard it at all. But when it came again, louder this time, no one could pretend it was the wind or the creak of old wood. Grace Hill Church, once solemn and still, now pulsed with unease. People whispered. Some shuffled in their seats. Others moved slowly back from the casket, as if whatever was inside might reach out and grab them. Sarah held her daughter tighter than ever. Emily had gone silent, her little hands gripping her mother's dress, eyes wide and unblinking as she stared at the closed coffin. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears. She tried to breathe, to reason with herself. But how do you reason with a child who hears her father's voice from beyond the grave? The tension broke when the heavy oak doors creaked open. Everyone turned. Richard Blake, Jackson's 44-year-old brother-in-law, stepped into the church, dressed in a crisp black suit, his tie perfectly knotted. His presence felt out of place. Too sharp, too polished. His eyes scanned the room and locked on Sarah. "Sorry I'm late," he said smoothly, though he didn't seem sorry at all. He walked straight toward her, his polished shoes clicking against the old stone floor. He offered a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sarah, I can't imagine what you're going through, but we need to talk about the house." Sarah blinked, confused. "The house?" "Yes," he said, voice low but firm. "Jackson had a lot of debts. The property's value could clear most of it. It might be wise to sell now before the paperwork gets messy." She stared at him. "Are you serious? He hasn't even been buried." Richard gave a slight shrug. "I'm just trying to help you move forward." But something in his tone made her stomach turn. Cold, calculated, like he wasn't here to grieve, he was here to claim something. Emily whimpered again, burying her face in Sarah's shoulder. Richard glanced at the child with an awkward grimace. "Kids don't understand death," he muttered. "Better not to let her talk nonsense. It's disturbing people." Sarah stiffened. "She's just mourning her father." "Is she?" he replied, his voice darker now. "Or is she making things harder for everyone?" There was a sharpness in his words that cut right through her. Suddenly, Emily peeked up again and pointed. "At the coffin." Her voice came out quiet but crystal clear. "Daddy's scared, Mama. He's calling again." Richard's face shifted. For a split second, the smooth mask dropped. His jaw tensed, and his eyes flickered. Not with concern, but something else, panic, guilt. Someone in the pews gasped. The thudding noise returned. 3 hard knocks, clear as day. Thud, thud, thud. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly toward Richard. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard took a step back, smoothing his tie with shaking fingers. "Nothing," he said quickly. "It's just the wood, expanding." But Sarah wasn't convinced. And now, neither were the people around them. Something was wrong. Something very wrong. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. The image of Emily pointing at the coffin, her tiny voice saying, "Daddy's scared," haunted her like a shadow that wouldn't lift. And then there was Richard, his sudden arrival, his pressure to sell the house, his cold response to her daughter's cries. Something about it all felt wrong, too rushed, too aggressive. And those sounds, the knocking. She hadn't imagined them. Others heard them too. The next morning, just after sunrise, a knock came at her front door. Sarah opened it to find Mark, one of Jackson's closest friends. His face was pale, his eyes tired. He hadn't shaved, and he looked like he hadn't slept either. "I need to talk to you," he said without waiting for an invitation. She let him in. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window. Emily was still asleep upstairs, curled up with her teddy bear. Mark leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "I didn't want to say anything yesterday. Not at the funeral, but something's been bothering me." Sarah tensed. "What is it?" 3 days before Jackson passed, Mark began. "He told me Richard was pressuring him to sell the house. Hard. He said Richard wouldn't stop. Calling, texting, even showing up uninvited. Jackson was angry. He told me he'd never sell it. He said the house was for you and Emily." Sarah's chest tightened. Her fingers dug into her mug. He said, Mark continued, "If anything ever happened to him, you shouldn't trust." Richard. Silence filled the room. Sarah felt her heart thud in her ears. "I thought it was just family drama," Mark added. "But after what your daughter said, after those sounds from the coffin," he trailed off. A cold chill ran through Sarah's spine. Just then her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Urgent. I need to speak with you. Dr. Esteban Cruz." "Who's that?" Mark asked. Sarah stared at the message. "I don't know. I think he's the forensic examiner," she texted back, and within 10 minutes a car pulled into her driveway. A man in a tan coat stepped out holding a folder close to his chest. "I'm Dr. Cruz," he said, extending a hand. "I came as soon as I could. "There's something you need to know about Jackson's death certificate." He opened the folder and slid it across the table. Sarah scanned it, her fingers trembling. Something was off. "The certificate, Doctor," Cruz explained, "was signed by a physician who doesn't exist. I cross-checked with the hospital. No official autopsy was conducted. There's no record of any attending doctor pronouncing Jackson dead." Mark cursed under his breath. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dr. Cruz said, his voice grim, "there's a real possibility Jackson wasn't dead when he was placed in that coffin." Sarah froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Dr. Cruz continued, "We need to stop the burial right now." Sarah stood, her heart pounding, eyes wide with horror. If Jackson had been alive, if he was still alive, then Richard hadn't just lied. He may have buried her husband alive. Sarah didn't wait another second. The moment Dr. Cruz confirmed the forgery, something inside her snapped. The fear, the grief, the confusion. It all collapsed into one burning need to get Jackson out of that coffin. They raced to Grace Hill Church in Mark's truck, the tires screeching against the pavement as they sped through back roads and winding hills. Dr. Cruz sat in the back, gripping his files with white knuckles. No one spoke. The silence was louder than words. When they arrived, the funeral director had already begun preparing for the burial. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, leaping out of the truck. "Don't move him!" The man froze. Others turned, confused. Sarah stormed through the church doors with Mark and Dr. Cruz on her heels. The air inside was still heavy with incense and sorrow, but something darker now lingered beneath it. Fear. People murmured as she approached the front. Emily, who had been sitting with Aunt May, ran to her mother and clung to her leg. "He's still calling," she whispered. "Daddy's still there." Sarah knelt and kissed her daughter's forehead. "I know, baby. Mama's going to help him." She stood tall and turned toward the coffin. The polished oak shimmered in the candlelight, silent, unmoving, but Sarah no longer trusted what she saw. Her hand trembled as she stepped closer, her fingers grazing the edge of the lid. Behind her, Mark cleared his throat. "We should wait for law enforcement." "No," she said firmly, her voice steady for the first time in days. "If he's alive, we don't have time." Dr. Cruz stepped forward. "I'll assist, but you'll need help lifting it." Mark and another man from the town, James, came forward. Together, the three of them placed their hands on the lid. Beat of silence, then thud, louder than before. Gasps broke out across the pews. Emily whimpered and buried her face into Aunt May's shawl. Even the priest, Reverend Carter, stood frozen near the altar, whispering a silent prayer. Thud, thud. This time it wasn't just a sound. It was desperation. Sarah nodded. "Open it." With a grunt and a heave, the lid cracked, then creaked as it slowly lifted. Light poured in, revealing what lay inside. And there he was, Jackson. His skin was pale, lips cracked, and his body was trembling. But his chest, God, it was moving. His chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. He was alive. Sarah's knees buckled. She dropped to his side, her fingers brushing his cheek. "Jackson," she whispered, tears falling like rain. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open. One tear slipped from the corner of his eye. Emily broke free from Aunt May's arms and crawled onto the edge of the platform. "Daddy," she cried. "We found you." Jackson's lips parted, barely able to speak, but his gaze locked on Sarah, full of pain and love and everything in between. Mark shouted, "We need paramedics, now!" Dr. Cruz checked his pulse. "He's weak, but stable." "We got to him in time." Sarah cradled his face in her hands, sobbing. "You're safe now, you're safe." But deep down she knew this was only the beginning. The sirens screamed down the church road less than 5 minutes after the call. Paramedics rushed into Grace Hill Church with stretchers, oxygen, and wide, disbelieving eyes. One of them, upon seeing Jackson still breathing inside a coffin, muttered under his breath, "My God." They carefully lifted his fragile, trembling body out from the box meant to bury him, his pulse faint, his breathing shallow, but present. Sarah held his hand the entire time, never letting go. Emily sat beside them, her tiny fingers brushing his arm gently, as if to remind him he wasn't alone. As Jackson was loaded into the ambulance, Richard appeared, looking like a ghost himself. He froze when he saw Jackson alive. His face went white, his breath caught in his throat. He looked like a man who had seen the dead rise. He hadn't expected this. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes filled with fire. "You buried him alive," she whispered. Richard tried to deny it, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. Sheriff Anderson arrived moments later, demanding answers. Mark wasted no time. He pressured Jackson to sell the house, he said. When Jackson refused, Richard slipped him something to knock him out. Then he forged the death certificate and tried to bury him for good. "That true?" the sheriff asked sharply. Dr. Cruz nodded. The death certificate was signed by a non-existent physician. Jackson was never officially declared dead. Richard began to panic. "It was an accident. I didn't know he was allergic. I just wanted him to sign the papers." But no one wanted to hear it. Sheriff Anderson stepped forward. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Richard struggled, as deputies locked cuffs around his wrists, screaming, "You have to believe me!" "I didn't mean to kill him." Sarah's voice cut through his pleas. "But you meant to take everything from us." Richard's knees gave out. 3 weeks later, the courtroom in Castleton County was packed. News of what happened at Grace Hill. Church had spread fast, and every seat in the gallery was taken. Richard sat at the defendant's table, no longer polished, no longer confident, just a husk of a man, his eyes hollow. He barely looked up as the prosecutor listed the charges: attempted murder, falsifying a legal document, and unlawful burial of a living person. But all eyes shifted when Jackson entered the courtroom, leaning on a cane, but alive. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the judge paused. Before sentencing, Jackson requested to speak. He turned toward Richard. "I don't hate you," Jackson said slowly, his voice raw from trauma. "But I will make sure you never do this to anyone else. You buried me and tried to bury my family with me. You failed." The judge's gavel fell. "Richard Blake, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison." Applause broke out. Some wept. Others just breathed for the first time in weeks. A month later, Jackson stood on his front porch, holding Sarah's hand as Emily played in the yard. The wind was warm. The sun was gentle. He looked at them both and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." And Sarah smiled. "Welcome home." This story wasn't just about survival. It was about the unshakable bond of family, the courage to trust your instincts, and the chilling reminder that truth will always rise, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Now we'd love to hear from you. What was the moment that struck you the most? Was it little Emily's innocent bravery, Sarah's unwavering strength, or Jackson's final words in the courtroom? Let us know in the comments below your thoughts, feelings, or even personal experiences with family loyalty, justice, or intuition that saved the day. And tell us, where are you watching from? We're building a global family of story lovers here, and seeing comments from all over the world reminds us that storytelling connects hearts beyond borders. Your comment could inspire someone else, or even become the spark for our next story. So, don't be shy, drop your thoughts below, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's story is just as emotional and powerful, and we can't wait to share it with you. Until then, thank you for being part of this journey.